Violence continued through the night in Egypt as protesters once again defied curfews. Rocks, bottles and firebombs were thrown, automatic gunfire heard as opposition demonstrators clashed with supporters of President Mubarak. State TV is saying 3 people are dead, 600 injured, though some of the images we're seeing suggest that that toll could well rise. Egyptian soldiers stood by, idle, only intervening to use their water cannons to put out fires. Senator Patrick Leahy chairs the U.S. panel that oversees foreign aid. He says there'll be no more cash for Egypt until Mubarak steps down.
He should leave and allow, before the violence gets even more out of hand, allow a transitional government to try to put the pieces back together. The United States will work with them and it will help them, but we're not going to help the current regime.
Well, the White House has stopped short of blaming the Egyptian government for starting the violence, but local reports suggest that pro-government protesters instigated the clashes. Here you can see Mubarak supporters mounted on camels and horses, wielding machetes, charging into crowds of demonstrators. State TV blamed the Muslim Brotherhood opposition group and also Hamas. Now, these are the latest pictures coming to us this morning from Cairo's main Tahrir Square. Our reporter Lara Setrakian is there, though she's confined to a hotel room, given the pitched battles that have been raging in the streets. She joins us on the phone now. And Lara, just take us through events, what you've been seeing happening in Tahrir Square.
Mariam, what we're seeing this hour, just to give you a taste of the intensity, there's a voice in the center of Tahrir Square with the protesters that's just told the men to gather to protect the square from intruders, from the onslaught of pro-government forces. And he told the women and children to stay in the middle, and he started reading off the names of those who've gone missing in a night of intense fighting. Overnight, we did hear those gun battles raging. We saw Molotov cocktails being thrown onto the crowd. The army did stand by. We didn't see any intervention or any attempt to keep the two sides from getting at each other's throats. Men creating barricades out of corrugated metal, doing anything they can at this very basic level of street fighting. We saw stones thrown in both directions, and a sense here that the violence has just encouraged both sides to dig in their heels and has really galvanized this country on either side of a very steep political divide.
And Lara, we're just looking at pictures right now, clouds of smoke emerging from the square, more and more people congregating in that area. Do we have any idea of exactly who these people are? Are they mainly anti-government protesters we're seeing here?
What we've seen so far this morning is supporters of the opposition, those calling for Mubarak to step down, filing into the square. Army soldiers were patting them down, trying to make sure they didn't have any weapons. But other than that, they let them pass. So the crowd has been swelling since morning. You get a sense that, again, this has galvanized supporters of the opposition. They want to come join this protest. Today was meant to be relatively quiet. There's a kind of tempo to this, Mariam, that we've talked about, where today was meant to be a relatively quiet day. Friday was going to be the show of force. They were hoping to bring out the millions that we've seen come out in the days past. This has been, of course, a game changer for Egypt, a country that has never seen this kind of civil strife, has now fallen deep into a puzzle of how to sort itself out, how to unwind these very, very tense emotions that are driving this country in 2 very different directions.
Yeah, the show of force from the pro-Mubarak demonstrators complicates the situation, as you say, Lara. So what does all this mean for President Hosni Mubarak and his regime?
We've already heard perspective this morning from analysts who've been relatively neutral throughout this, who now say this has cut in to whatever legitimacy the Mubarak regime had left. We've spoken to protesters in the past 24 hours who said, how could we stop? How could we give up our fight, our protest, after everything that's happened? They want Mubarak out of office. They don't want him to continue on to September. He's made some very steep concessions, things we had never expected to see. He's gone from being practically a leader for life in Egypt, trying to ensure the succession of his son, to a man who's basically guaranteed he'd step down in September, try to transition towards a very, very different government. Now, all of that is in question. The U.S. has lost some of its leverage. They've asked Mubarak to step down sooner, and he has rejected those calls. You see here a regime that seems to be backed into a corner and doing what it can to survive and to hold on to power. The army is a big part of that. They're playing both sides of the divide, and at this point, helping Mubarak stay in power.
Now we're just seeing, we're looking at pictures here of crowds of young men starting to throw stones, this after those violent clashes just yesterday. Lara, I know you'll stay across this situation for us. Lara Setrakian on webcam from Cairo.